the generosity of spirit, and this is something that has followed us since we started. And I'll remind you that Ross and I we had no idea what we were doing from the beginning. So everything we did, we since the beginning had this naive superpower, which was like, we don't know what we're doing, but we're going to figure it out, and we're going to build it and build it and build it and build it. And we asked for help the entire way through, but we never let our own limitations be our ultimate limitation. We never let our own shortcomings stop us.
Hi, I'm Mike Abel, a business, marketing and communications specialist and the founder of MNC Saatchi Abel. I'm a family man, a problem solver, a futurist, and an optimist at heart. Welcome to my podcast, Willing Abel, the home of hopeful conversations that challenge perspectives. It's a continuation of the ideas and conversations I began in my book, Willing Abel, Lessons from a Decade in Crisis. My guest today is Nick Dreyer. He's an entrepreneur, CEO, and public speaker. Nick is the co-founder of Veldskoen Shoes, which started as a side hustle in 2016 and has grown into a global footwear brand, selling in 32 countries and worn by South Africa's best at the 2020 Olympic Games. Welcome, Nick. So great to have you here today.
Thank you so much for having me. And it's a rare privilege to be talking to you about our story, especially the company that I'm in right now with you, having seen close up so many great brands and businesses and have been participatory in so many successful South African stories. So thank you for having me.
Absolute pleasure, and looking forward to get stuck into the story. In fact, you don't actually know that I have a deep connection with Veldskoen.
Tell me.
And I didn't tell you before the podcast
No.
that I could sabotage you at this very moment. So I used to run the VW advertising for many years when I was at Ogilvy and running Ogilvy. And you may recollect David Kramer and his red fellies.
Veldskoen.
Ja, das recht. So we might have some Veldskoen moments today. In fact, this whole thing is an Veldskoen moment.
It is an Veldskoen moment. And when, I think back at the early days when we first looked at Veldskoen, even as an idea.
Yeah.
We looked at those videos on YouTube, with him tearing up a mountain pass and figuring out how to get a Volkswagen or a fire engine, I believe it was. That
a
was
fire
broken
engine,
down.
through a Volksy bus.
And I had the great privilege of having David Kramer at our opening of our museum not long ago, and it was a moving moment. We actually have a pair of his Veldskoen in our museum.
That's amazing. I want to come and visit your museum. I didn't know that you had started one, and that's testimony to the brand you're building, that you've already set up a Veldskoen museum.
Well, okay, it's maybe museum is a little bit of largesse. Let's call it a mini museum. It's a small, tiny storytelling
bookshelf.
Space. Yes, exactly. But we're setting out to become the new, tiny, thin giraffe that everybody bought when they came to South Africa. Have you ever seen one of those wooden sculptures of a giraffe? Veldskoen is trying to become the new wooden giraffe, which is something that everyone leaves South Africa with as a memory with. And the museum serves that purpose, or the mini museum serves that purpose, to teach them a little bit more about why the shoe is so important. And hopefully they want to take it with them.
I love that. In fact, I'll tell you another David Kramer story while we're chatting. So my paternal grandfather, had movie houses in Worcester and Paarl. Mm-hmm. And back in the day, during interval, David Kramer would come out with his guitar and entertain the audience while they changed the reel. And his song Budgie and the Jets at the 20th Century is based on my grandpa's movie house, the 20th Century.
That's incredible. Why can't they do that anymore?
Yeah.
Why can't we have a mid-movie break and have some talented musician come and entertain us for a couple of songs?
A Veldskoen moment.
A Veldskoen moment.
There we go.
Ster Kinnikwa, you're listening.
Love that. So it's very interesting, when I talk to entrepreneurs, because I like to go a little bit back in your life to understand your journey here. So we're going to talk about you as a young boy, all right? Did you have any sense growing up in Pretoria what you wanted to be when you were big, as they say? Were your parents entrepreneurs?
Not at all. My parents were civil servants. My mom was a teacher and a librarian. And my dad was first a pilot, a fighter pilot.
Oh, wow.
And he then ended up being working in military intelligence at the time of the transition of the government. And he was, of course, very busy. I'm always nervous when I say what I wanted to be, because I once told a publication that I actually wanted to be a fighter pilot like my dad. And then they published that I was a fighter pilot. So
Yes.
I've got so many mates that come to me and go, were you actually a fighter pilot? And
Yes.
I wasn't. But I had visions of Top Gun,
Yeah.
and as a young boy. And then going into Standard 9 or Matric, sort of 17, 18 years old, it was an interesting time in the country, 1996.
Yeah.
And to be fair, all I really wanted to do was travel. I didn't know what I had to do that, but I knew that I wanted to do something which would allow me to see the world. And that ended up being hospitality. And I ended up studying that in the Cape.
Amazing. And with that, I saw you became at some point the general manager of the magnificent Element House.
Yes, that's maybe the formative part of my career in hospitality. I was very lucky. I applied for a job at this place called Element House. I didn't really know anything about it.
Yeah.
I started as a duty manager.
Okay.
I then, I think a year in, discovered that it was owned by this man called Paul Harris.
Yeah.
I had...
Another great South African entrepreneur.
Ends up being my great mentor in life.
Yeah, great.
I also walked through the halls of Element House in the first 8 months trying to understand what all the fuss was about with the art. And
Maggie Loebsch's,
and Penif, and I couldn't get my head around. So I spent about a year studying these works and studying artists, and I became deeply passionate about it to the point where I loved it so much. Paul allowed me to really get my hands and mind into that art collection, and that culminated many years later becoming involved with Everard Reed, the great gallery of Africa. And so Element House is a very important part of my young career segment, I suppose.
I'm also a great art lover, as you may or may not know, and collect contemporary African art, but I do have some of the masters. But every time I do go there for a meal or a function, I walk around and I just try and absorb what they've got on their walls. And I was actually meant to be there 2 weeks ago for Art Angels. I don't know if you're there, Nicola's charity event. But what an amazing place. So what salacious information are you going to give us on the celebrities that were there?
I can't give you any information without implicating myself. So
really? When you and Michael Jackson were in the bubble bath?
I tell you, no, that's this very special property which has attracted so many special people. And the one thing I will tell you about having met so many high-profile human beings that have stayed at that hotel is learning that they are so human, most of them, and just really nice people, and the humility that comes with it. I was very lucky once to meet Denzel Washington at the hotel. In fact, he was staying next door and had come for a couple of meals, and I just remember being overwhelmed with what a gentleman he was.
Yeah.
And it's often that catches you out. You think these people are above being human, but really they are very aware of their humanity. So I love the time spent there and meeting all of these interesting people.
Yeah, well, it's good to hear about Denzel because I've always been a great fan, and it's always nice to know when the human being matches up to the celebrity, I guess. Nick, you started Veldskoen shoes as a side hustle. What was your main job at the time?
Failure. Accumulating creditors. No, it's true. Ross and myself, at the time of thinking about Veldskoen, were in a position where I had an exhibitions business and an art advisory business that had not, the art advisory business had not even managed to start.
Okay.
So it didn't even have a chance to fail. I had this.
Was that because of cash flow? What was
just
the reason
because
for that?
it just at the time I thought that folks around the world would want to pay for advice around art services and art logistics and appraisals and all the rest of it. Turns out most folks want that advice for free.
Yeah,
and
included in the price.
I couldn't raise an invoice. So that didn't even start. Then I started an events business which specialized in big exhibitions. So we brought out the world's biggest Lego exhibition, the Art of the Brick, and we brought out
I remember
Titanic,
that.
the artifacts of the Titanic.
Yeah.
And that business at the when we say Veldskoen was a side hustle, it wasn't actually a side hustle. It was an idea born out of absolute desperation to try and figure out how we may survive in the coming months. And it was the same for Ross. Ross was in the building industry. His business had suffered terribly. And when we came up with this idea about Veldskoen, we had this joint destruction that was imminent. Young families, almost no income. We'd both dug massive holes, and we had to figure out how to get out of it. So Veldskoen was more a hopeful dream that kept our spirits up over that difficult time than it was a side hustle or an idea that we wanted to just go out and build it. And I think it's a surprising thing for people to hear that. But when we built Veldskoen, it was because we had to build Veldskoen. We just happened to have a really great idea. But it wasn't that we woke up and planned out a business and a brand. It was born out of absolute desperation.
That's incredibly valuable for people listening to your story today, because it actually coincides. There's a lot of serendipity in this conversation, because actually my post on LinkedIn earlier today and on my other social channels was a picture of an iceberg where I say people only get to see the shiny white thing above the water. Nobody knows of all of that stuff that actually lies beneath it.
Correct.
And you talk so clearly about the challenges around that. So what sparked the Veldskoen idea?
This is one of the most romantic business stories I've ever heard, even though I was participatory. This is how it happens. You're a fan of Plettenberg Bay, so am I. My mom was there. And I set off driving from Plet to Cape Town, which, as you know, is a 6 to 6.5 hour journey.
Yeah.
And Ross was in Cape Town. And this is my best friend. This is my friend since I was 8 years old. And
oh, wow.
Ross and I,
That's amazing.
we're best mates, okay? And often I find myself phoning him. We speak to each other 10 times a day on the phone. It drives our families crazy, but we always have.
He's like a brother.
He's like a brother.
Yeah.
And on this very day, I said to him, boy, I'm in the car for 6.5 hours. I'm going to give you a couple of calls just to stay awake and all the rest of it. And he was like, yeah, I'm driving around Cape Town trying to be a builder still, and I'll be in the car a bit, so let's chat. So I think it was about 2 hours in when we, as friends do, moaned about something in South Africa. And the thing that we moaned about was the opening ceremony of the Olympic Games in Rio de Janeiro. And we moaned that the South African team, when they came out, looked appalling. They wore these strange tracksuits.
Yeah, I remember it.
We subsequently found out there was only extra large and small. And the team had walked out, and Ross and I had this quite organic argument about, one, come on, surely we could have done better than that. And secondly, the argument was, okay, but what could they have been wearing to make them feel and look South African? And then a little debate starts. And it was like, they should have been wearing Madiba shirts. And I think one of us said, yeah, they're cool, but the truth is that Madiba wears a Madiba shirt.
Yeah.
You know, it's not every South African wears a Madiba shirt.
Yeah.
And then it was like, yeah, but there's very little that every South African wears. You know, the French, not everybody wears a beret, but it's associated to the French. And the Congolese with all their colors. And we were searching for something. And in the conversation, one of us said, the only thing that every South African knows, piece of apparel that every South African knows to be South African, is a Veldskoen. And the other guy said, yeah, but they're never going to walk out with Veldskoen because Veldskoen are deeply boring. And you'll notice I'm not accrediting either Ross or myself at this point for who said what, because we genuinely don't remember.
Yes.
At Bryce, we'll claim it.
Yes.
But the truth is we don't really remember. Yeah. And I had just been exposed to a pair of shoes it was an Oxford brogue and it had a bright yellow sole on it.
Okay.
And it was a Cole Haan, and they'd done a partnership with Nike. And this was in my mind. And I said to Ross, but why does a Veldskoen have to be boring? And he goes, what do you mean? So I said, surely we could, if you had to add color to a Veldskoen, wouldn't it look different? I then phoned a young guy that was working in my exhibitions business who could do Photoshop. And I said to him, won't you please Photoshop a pair of Veldskoen and Photoshop the soles yellow and matching laces. And he says, okay, cool, I'll do that for you. He says, what other colors would you like? And off the top of my head, I said, why don't you just take the colors of the South African flag? 20 minutes later, I'm still in the car, driving and the WhatsApp comes through and all of the images come through of these Photoshopped Veldskoen, but it's one image that he'd Photoshopped in all the different colors. And I send it to Rossi immediately and we're swiping through them and the shoe stays the same and the colors change. And a lightning bolt went off in the car as it did in Ross's car. And we had seen something. We had seen something look so different. The sentence was, we should start a Veldskoen business. The next person that spoke, I think, was Ross, and he said, we should call it Veldskoen. And I said to him, Ross, you could never call a company Veldskoen because surely that's not possible. And he said,
That's trademarked.
He says, let me figure it out.
Yeah.
Let me figure it out. This part of the story then gets very granular because we're back and forth all the time. But the highlight is, when I arrived in Cape Town, I think it was 4 hours after we started the conversation, Veldskoen Pty Limited was registered with SIPSI.
Wow.
And we'd put in an application to trademark the word Veldskoen, which nobody had ever done. And in that moment, Veldskoen Shoes was born.
Incredible. Born in a car.
It was born in a car, and it was born to parents that had zero experience in shoes, zero experience in marketing, zero experience in e-commerce, zero experience even in starting their own businesses, really, if you think about the failures that we had.
Yeah.
And nothing in design, nothing in fashion. The two of us were the least likely people ever to start a footwear business. And to this day, I think we are the least likely. But it was in that moment that it was born, and then the race was on. We had to go. And that's how it starts.
It's amazing. I mean, you look at, South African brands that have done really well around the world. One happens to be my brilliant client, Nando's. Great concept born out of, an exceptional meal that, Robbie and Fernando had.
Chicken Land.
Exactly.
Pty Limited.
And then you look at some of the newer brands in South Africa today, Maklosa, Laduma's clothing range. You look at the art world, Nelson Makamo that's taking on the world. And then you look at Veldskoen, which has a very different heritage. And what I love about it is it's the opposite of the obvious. Because if you look at South Africa's past, Veldskoen were worn by the most conservative Afrikaans people during apartheid. And here it is as this modern, vibrant, beautiful, future-looking South African brand. And so was there, when you created Veldskoen, how did it occur to you that it would be relevant within a new South Africa?
Well, when we started reading about Veldskoen and really learning about it, we found that it has a 300-year Southern African history.
Really? Okay.
So the one undeniable place that it existed was in the conservative South African context. And then it was also school shoes in Zimbabwe. It was also the hunter boot.
I didn't know it was school shoes in Zimbabwe.
Yeah. Okay. It was the hunter boot in parts of Lesotho.
Yeah.
And it had a rich history.
Yeah.
And it was widely loved. And it was loved for a couple of reasons. One, a Veldskoen intrinsically, since it's been made, has always been known to be very well made.
Yeah.
In other words, it can last. It's a product of quality.
Yeah.
That was baked into its DNA.
Yeah.
The other thing is a Veldskoen is super comfortable. We've always known a Veldskoen to be comfortable. Not me and Ross. Literally, that's what it's known for.
Had you ever worn a Veldskoen before?
Never.
Oh, okay.
Never. Then I think also the other thing that characteristic of a Veldskoen is that it doesn't take itself too seriously. And when you overlaid that to where we were operating mostly at the time, which is South Africa, that felt a lot like South Africans. South Africans are very well made. We've been put through the fire. We've been hardened. We're good stock. The second thing is we're unbelievably comfortable people. We really are. We're known for it globally. And then the last one is we also don't take ourselves too seriously. So we made a conscious decision that Veldskoen would be for everyone, the soul of South Africa. One, the market is bigger when it's for everyone. Two, it was the natural place because we wanted to make a shoe that represented all of South Africa at the Olympic Games. That was literally the genesis of the idea. And in order to do that, you had to represent Mzansi.
Yeah.
Add the color, add the vibrancy, celebrate South Africa in everything we did. So our red shoes called the Pinotage, the yellow shoes called the Vilakazi.
I didn't know that name.
Yeah.
So carry on.
And the J-Bay, the blue one, the best left break, surf break on planet Earth. Vilakazi, the only street with 2 Nobel Peace Prize winners on it that have lived there.
Yeah.
What a remarkable thing.
Incredible.
Pinotage, our own varietal. So we celebrated South
That is
Africa in
brilliant.
every single thing we did.
Yeah.
And we try to occupy the room in the social consciousness as a small brand, which celebrates and thinks about all that is positive South Africa without denying the other stuff, but rather shining a light on the stuff that we can control, which is the positivity and the energy that this beautiful place offers, not just us, but as a place. And we just absolutely focused our minds on creating a product that would make us feel good about being South African.
Yeah. Bring us together.
To bring us together. And we almost wanted to create a uniform for people that feel South African. And that really is all of us.
What I love about your story and what I'm thinking about is that iconic moment of Madiba and Francois Pinault, and how a sport that had represented a different past suddenly became the thing that I guess we probably should be most proud of as a country, having now won 4 Rugby World Cups, and a sport that represents the very best. And I think that there are so many learnings that if you lean into something hard and embrace the upside and the positivity and the unifying aspects, you can unlock incredible magic.
1994 taught this country that we're in the business of miracles. We do this. This is a tough place.
Yeah.
We have cultural diversity more than most places on planet Earth, but we have come through it. We've come together. And we've come together through symbols like rugby and soccer and President Madiba and Desmond Tutu. And
cricket.
and
Let's not forget cricket.
And let's not forget them. And the Drakensberg and Table Mountain and everything. So the idea that there is positive symbolism in South Africa that can make us all try and grow and remember who we are and remember what we're capable of as people is very, very important to us. And we focus our energy as a brand. And Ross and I are built this way. We are optimists. I love that you call yourself an optimist.
Yeah.
We are optimists and we are actually patriotic, but we're real and we don't shy away from the tough stuff. But the reality is that I still believe this is one of the greatest places on earth to be.
Of course it is.
Yeah.
And I think that there are countries around the world and entrepreneurs around the world that when they listen to this podcast will think, how do I apply that magic to my own country, our own DNA? Because I think that a huge part of why South Africa's creativity is in such demand is because it's fresh.
Yeah.
And it's got soul in it. It's not just designed in terms of commercial gain, but it has an extra dimension. I mean, one of the things that fascinated me about Veldskoen, and I don't want to age your target market in any way, but my late dad, he passed in January. It was his birthday in September last year. And we've got a holiday place out in Benguela area, Hermanus. And I went to O'Meal to go and buy some chicken pies for lunch.
Yeah.
And I saw Fellies for sale there.
Yeah.
Your Veldskoen. And so I looked at it and you've just reminded me because I bought him the blue pair and it said J Bay on it.
Yeah.
And I remembered growing up in Port Elizabeth, which is where I'm from, Gqeberha, surfing with him at J Bay.
Yeah.
And so I bought him those. So what is the distribution channel that you apply for Veldskoen? Because it was very interesting for me to see Veldskoen in a place that sells pies and coffee and wine as opposed to a clothing store.
I'm so pleased you've mentioned it. So the conventional wisdom for a brand, right, is more stores. Open stores, like brand-centric stores. But when Ross and I started Veldskoen, there was 2 critical components to it. One was price. It had to be accessible. Our shoe, the heritage shoe, the J-Bay, the Pinotage, all the rest of it, had to be accessible from a price point of view. It's escalated a little bit now, but we actually put that price under tremendous pressure. And we absorb inflationary costs almost every year in order to keep that shoe at a price where it makes sense for everyone. Yes, it is out of reach for a lot of people, but it has never been outpriced. So the first component was to price it correctly. The second component is if you want to be the shoe for everyone, it's got to be available everywhere.
I like that.
So we have spent 6 years making sure that we are available in Nababib, in Bloemfontein, in Potch, in Durban, in Umhlanga, in Cape Town, in Plet. We've tried to find places. We've tried to be as wide as possible. And the way that you do that is by not only focusing on traditional apparel or footwear retail. I mean, we're available in butcheries. You know, we're available in a butchery outside the Hardepeerspoort Dam. We're available at an optometrist in Stellenbosch. We're available everywhere that retail partners feel they could sell it to South Africans.
Yeah.
And we embrace all of it. And remember, we're not burdened by, is our brand a good fit? Blah, 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 you know, because it's often, I don't want to associate my brand with this brand, or I don't want to associate my brand with this brand. The truth is, Veldskoen is for everyone. The young, the old, the good-looking, the not-so-good-looking, the thin, the fat guy like me. It's for boys, girls, any color, any wealth, waiters, CEOs. It doesn't matter. So if you can find a pair of Veldskoen, what you're really finding is you're finding that thing that makes us us, and you're choosing to buy it at a really great price, and it must be available to you. And if you like it, which most people do, then you can buy it for your kids, you can buy it for your dad, you can buy it for your sister. It really is irrelevant. It's become a ubiquitous product in South Africa.
Mike Abel's book, Willing and Able, Lessons from a Decade in Crisis, captures the stories of clients and partners and the wins, losses, and learnings through his eyes in a career spanning 3 decades. Whether you're looking for courage or inspiration, to learn what it takes to disrupt industries, or discover how to transform your company meaningfully and truly empower your people, you'll find it between these pages. You can listen to the audiobook on Audible, download it on your Kindle, order it online, or find it at your favorite bookstore.
Well, it's so fascinating, and again, you know, for our listeners to apply some creative thinking around targeting, because normally targeting your audience is highly scientific and specific. But when you say your target audience is everyone,
Everyone with feet.
you know, everyone with feet. You know,
And even some folks without feet, as we saw with the Olympics.
yeah, it's kind of reminds you. Got one of my clients is AVR, and they've got, you know, these fabulous biscuits that we all grew up with called Bakers.
Yes.
And it kind of feels very much to me like Baker's biscuits, you know, that, you know, no matter who you are, no matter what age, you're going to find something, you know, there that you enjoy. And I think that having a ubiquitous, to use your word, footwear brand that people will attach their own identity to, as opposed to the brand defining them, is really interesting. You know, many years ago, Nick, I mentioned VW, but City Golf. And the colours of those soles reminded me a little bit of the red, yellow, blue. And we always people used to say to us, well, who is the target audience for the City Golf? And we used to say people who are not that young in years, but maybe young in heart. Because a lot of the people weren't the students buying the car, but people buying it for affordability. But what they loved was the value system and the colour associated, the vibrancy, the hope, the opportunity. And I think you seem to have plugged into that zeitgeist.
We started with a broad view of the market. And funnily enough, now that we're maturing, we are looking for veins of opportunity within that market by moving into slightly more focused areas. And I'd be interested to hear your take on it, because I think most companies that are big, I suppose, they're looking for a particular audience, or they're looking for a you know, especially at launch, I think you're trying to find your audience, because it focuses your spend, it focuses your marketing rands, all the rest of it. We started wide, okay, and even our first Facebook campaign was "The Legend is Back." We made people assume that we had existed for 300 years. So everyone was like, "Oh my God, my dad used to love it," or "Oh my goodness, I've been looking for these for my kids." So it was broad.
Yeah.
But what we've done over time, of course, because of the price pressure that we faced with the original shoe, we've been creating other products in other product segments to the
I was
point.
going to go there. Tell me. Yeah.
So we started. The first one was Chelsea boots. We had a big demand for Chelsea boots in the UK, so we started to create a Chelsea boot, but we followed the color through. So the gusset, that elastic piece on the Chelsea boot, we made those our colors. Then we started to make children's shoes. Then we started to make slightly more casual shoes. We've just brought out a sneaker range, all the way through to now a golf shoe. But the golf shoe isn't being sold to folks that have never heard of Veldskoen. It's being sold to golfers that have been wearing our shoes for the last 4 or 5 years, and giving them a product that they can now add to their cupboard within our brand, but it like ticks all of those brand dynamics: comfortable, really well made, and you'd enjoy this because from a brand positioning perspective, we realized we could never compete with golf shoes in the world because they're all aimed at performance. Use these shoelaces and hit it further. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So our golf shoe is positioned as the above average shoe for the below average golfer.
That's hilarious.
Because what we learned was 90% of people are really bad at golf.
Yeah.
So we want to give them a uniform to feel comfortable on a golf course. And so
The
our
19th hole shoe.
Yeah, so we've now started sponsoring golf days, but the only way we sponsor them is if you give the 4-ball that came last a pair of shoes. And it's proven to be super fun, but it's also it's a really well-made shoe. It was designed by a professional golfer. So
Is it a suede shoe or
it's
not?
actually the whole grain leather.
Okay.
And it's a proper golf shoe.
Okay.
I can tell you that. But again, just in terms of market segmentation and trying to find opportunity within a broad market, that's how we've gone about it. But we were lucky because the entire country knows what a Veldskoen is.
Yeah.
It's the other way around. I think where we arrived was that everybody knew who we were, even though we didn't exist. And that's different to when you're trying to launch a product into a market and educate folks. You can't do that. You can't sell the word of a brand to every single South African. You're going to have to find pockets where you can operate and spend money to do that. So it's just interesting how Veldskoen, just by sheer almost luck, I suppose, captured all of that brand equity, and now we can start focusing.
Yeah.
It's the other way around.
That's fascinating because while you're talking, I'm thinking to myself, well, the definition of a brand is how consumers feel about a product. So if you look at Veldskoen, the brand, is Veldskoen footwear or is Veldskoen clothing or is Veldskoen other things? So when you look at Nike, and I presume you've read Shoe Dog, being a shoe man yourself, you'll see that Phil Knight obviously started off, with Nike being a tacky or a pair of sneakers. And sorry for the listeners overseas, tackies is our South African colloquial term for sneakers. And now Nike Town, whether you're buying tracksuits or hoodies or whatever, you can buy anything from Nike. Is Veldskoen going to branch out into other areas other than footwear? Is it going to be an apparel brand?
It's tempting, but no. We will have ancillary supportive product. So we will have socks and we will have belts and we will have caps. But apparel, shoe is in the name. A skoen is a shoe, for those that don't know what a skoen is. So it will be very heavily biased towards footwear.
Okay.
And it will have support product that will support the brand. But we're not going to bring out a Veldskoen jacket. It might be on a limited run basis for specific tasks or for specific events. But I don't think it'll be mainstream in terms of trying to have a clothing range. Oddly enough, we're very popular in travel, so we'll probably end up doing a Veldskoen duffel bag, something that you could put shoes into.
That's nice.
But the way I see Veldskoen is when I look at it as a brand, I look at it, funnily enough, not against another footwear brand.
Yeah.
I think it feels to me a little bit like Levi's. Levi's, everyone's had a pair of Levi's. And we want everyone to have a pair of Veldskoen in their cupboard at some point. So, and a pair of Levi's, 501s are attainable. They're at a price point where they are, they're not super premium, but at the same time, they do sell premium product, and then you can get into the whole fashion side of that business. But really, it's a stock item for your cupboard. A white T-shirt, a good white T-shirt, and a pair of jeans. And we're saying that a cupboard needs a pair of Veldskoen. And you can have a lot to choose from. You can have a basic one. You can have different colors. It's all the rest of it. But the nexus of it is to say it's super approachable, and it's something that is not going to let you down on a Tuesday afternoon when you just want to go to your mate's house, or you can put on a pair of Veldskoen, you can go to a board meeting, or you can go climb up a mountain. It doesn't matter.
And Nick, tell me, or maybe you could have your footwear brand as Veldskoen and your ancillary brands or spin-off brands as Fellies, because you've got another colloquial term in Fellies that I presume you guys will use at some point in time. So how did you get your footwear into the Olympic Games? Because you spoke about the shambolic outfits that our athletes wore the first time. Can't be that easy to take a brand new business that you've started in 2016, and just a mere 4 years later, our Olympic athletes are wearing Veldskoen. How did that happen?
This is another great story, and this is a great South African story. So, firstly, we had no idea how to do that. And I think we should acknowledge that in business, 90% of the time, you don't know how to do what you want to try to do.
Yeah.
You have to try and figure it out.
Yeah, you fail forwards.
Fail forwards. Great way to put it. And we had no idea, like anybody would have any idea.
Yeah.
So Nick Latouf, who was involved in our business early, he said, why don't we just ask?
Funny that.
Why don't you
What
just
a
ask?
thought.
And he filmed me.
Yeah.
And I made a Facebook video.
Okay.
And the Facebook video is still on Facebook. You can have a look at it. And it's
So
me.
you asked publicly?
I asked our audience, and I said,
Oh,
hi,
wow.
it's me, Nick.
Yeah.
We really would like our shoes to be on the Olympians at the next Olympic Games,
Yeah.
but we've got no idea how to do it.
Yeah.
If there's anybody out there that could give us some advice or point us in the right direction, it would be really very much appreciated. And the next day, my cell phone rang, and the phone goes, hi, Nick, it's Ravi. I'm the CEO of Saatchi. I heard you looking for me.
Incredible.
And I said to him, you must be joking. It takes your breath away.
Yeah.
Anyway, we started talking, and he said, and I explained to him what we wanted to do. I told him the story of Veldskoen, and he embraced it immediately. He said, look, we have to do this. We've got to get you on the opening games. But remember, this is like 2019. We're still very small. And the next thing, COVID hits. They put the games out, and nobody knows what's going on. But we negotiated this thing hard, and everything was looking on track. And then at the last minute, the great South African retailer, Mr. Price, wrote a very big check to sponsor the Olympics. And I thought we were toast. There's no way. Ravi was like gracious to give it to us, but when a big sponsor comes along, surely they're going to take this opening ceremony.
Yeah.
And I phoned Ravi up, and Ravi was very short with me on the phone. He goes, Nick, I'll phone you back tomorrow. But he says, just stay calm. Phones me back the next day and tells me that two things had happened. One, Saatchi fought to keep Veldskoen as the footwear apparel for the opening ceremony.
So separate from the Mr. Price deal.
They asked that it would be separate.
Amazing.
And to their credit, Mr. Price thought it was exactly the right thing to do.
Yeah, they got it.
Yeah. And I just think that's a cool thing to think about. We're so critical for many good reasons, but we have the ability as South Africa to really shine. And Saatchi in that moment, in a small way, shone.
Yeah.
And at the same time, a big retailer shone as well. And I didn't believe it was true. We carried on. We went and delivered the shoes. We saw them on stage when we saw those uniforms unveiled.
And what a moment.
Ross and myself at home at our Pardon Island office with our families and kids and our team. And we're watching and waiting for South Africa to come out. And there's the flag bearers, Chad, and the rest of the athletes. And there's a Vilakazi pair of Veldskoen, and there's a Pinotage pair of Veldskoen. And we erupted.
I'm getting goosies while you're telling me.
And I burst into tears.
I'm sure.
Ross and I burst into tears. And it was only upon reflection that we thought about it as a brand story, the full circle brand story. But in that moment, it was more about survival. We'd built something. We'd we'd faced cataclysmic death in COVID. We'd as a team all come together, hung in there as a family, and this represented an achievement, but also it felt like we'd broken through, and now we were on a different path towards potentially building a global brand. And at that moment was a critical moment in the thinking and in the belief system that we had in the business.
So, Nick, what's so beautiful about your story is there are a number of things that I take out of this particular example. And that is, firstly, you going onto Facebook and asking. And that is, there's a saying that, when you want something badly enough, the universe conspires to give it to you. And people don't often share their hopes and dreams. They keep it very secretive. But the universe vibrates towards putting stuff out there, not keeping it secret. The other thing that you talk about is a generosity of spirit, which I think Mr. Price absolutely showed you, because they knew they could still achieve all of the fame through the sponsorship and commercial requirements without having the footwear. So they got that, and they gave you that opportunity. And then, in terms of the Olympic Committee doing something that was for the country.
Yeah.
And you don't often find that when an organization will look at something and say, this might not be a big commercial opportunity, but it's an opportunity for resonance, for connection, for traction with our country. And that's magnificent.
And just to contextualize that moment, I can't tell you how small we were.
I can imagine.
We were a small business.
Yeah.
We had
4 years old.
we had no rights talking to SASCOC, to the Olympic Committee, about putting anything on anybody.
Yeah.
We had we were not just boxing we weren't even boxing.
Yeah.
We weren't even out of our weight class yet. The likelihood of that happening is so slim, but the generosity of spirit, and this is something that has followed us since we started. And I'll remind you that Ross and I we had no idea what we were doing from the beginning. So everything we did, we since the beginning had this naive superpower, which was like, we don't know what we're doing.
Yeah.
But we're going to figure it out, and we're going to build it and build it and build it and build it. And we asked for help the entire way through. But we never let our own limitations be our ultimate limitation. We never let our own shortcomings stop us. And that was just another good example of it. But the one thing we had to be, and I think this is also important to bear in mind, we had to be truthful about who we were. You've got to recognize in critical moments that you don't
have all the answers.
You don't have the answers.
Yeah.
And if you open yourself up to that, that's where growth happens.
Yeah.
That's where that elixir comes that moves it forward. And it comes in the most strange ways. Places.
So have you brought experts on board now? Do you have a whole lot of footwear aficionados? Or?
No. And it's not because we're not open to them. They're welcome to come and tell us exactly how to grow and build a scale of a business.
I think you know already. You're proving that.
But when we started 7 years ago, selling shoes online was almost unheard of.
Yeah.
Because you had to do exchanges. Warby Parker broke through when it came to eyeglasses.
Yeah.
Footwear as well. 7 years ago, there wasn't a model. There wasn't a blueprint. We were trying to figure it out. There was even less people in South Africa that were buying stuff online. And we've never hired, if we could, we would have hired agency. But
you still can.
Yeah, well, hopefully we go into it. But the reality is that we were not just a bootstrap, we were a true bootstrap.
Yeah.
We were literally using sales to fund the business.
Yes.
So Ross and I just had to learn everything. And then we hired people in key positions almost to alleviate workload, not to build the business. So interestingly enough, our first hire was a copywriter.
Okay.
Yeah. How funny is that for a
interesting.
footwear business? Our first hire was a copywriter, then a designer.
Yeah.
And that was because
you're storytellers.
we're storytellers. Exactly. And that part, we knew we needed real talent.
Yeah.
And you could hire young people that had different eyes, views on it. So it's just interesting to think how we built the business from a resource perspective. Again, we're trying to build it for everybody, but we just didn't have the resources to be able to plug in expertise and scale. Every single person at Veldskoen has learned on the job.
The street store turns 10 this year. The world's first rent-free, premises-free, free pop-up store provides a dignified shopping experience to those in need, allowing them to choose from a selection of pre-loved clothing and shoes. Over 1,000 stores have been hosted around the world in the past decade, and now we're calling on you to host your own. Visit thestreetstore.org to sign up and find out how.
So I'm going to ask you a hard question because I don't know the answer to it, and that is, are Veldskoen made in South Africa, and are the products that go into your footwear locally sourced? Are we building jobs here?
It's the one total and utter non-negotiable in our business. We have to make Veldskoen in South Africa. And we have been making Veldskoen in South Africa since the first day we made them. We simply can't entertain it in any other country in the world. The reason is, as champagne is to France, a Veldskoen is to South Africa. It would be wrong. And interestingly enough, I told you that we put in the trademark application. And in South Africa, we have no intent, and we have never pursued anybody that calls a Veldskoen, because we're trying to make the pizza bigger. We're trying to make more people wear Veldskoen. It doesn't have to be ours. But we have the trademark globally. If you have a Veldskoen in Spain and it's not made in South Africa, we will and have enforced that trademark aggressively. The entire point is to help South Africa in the same way that South Africa has helped us. We have managed to grow through our manufacturing partners, Hopewell in Durban. We have managed to grow their capacity. We've managed to inspire others to start Veldskoen businesses.
Do you know how many jobs have been created through Veldskoen?
It's an equation that's hard for us to come up with, because we aren't at the cold face of the manufacturing. What I can tell you is it takes 60 pairs of hands to make one Veldskoen, one of our Veldskoens. Now it goes to quantify. In year one, we made 500 pairs of Veldskoen. I think we're aiming at 200,000 a year now.
Oh wow. That's incredible.
Products. So if you look at it in those contexts, clearly you're going to be making more jobs. Clearly you're going to be creating more opportunity. And our entire supply chain, from leather to the soles to everything, all from South Africa.
Please keep it that way.
It will never change.
You know, you spoke about Mzansi, and I think that
it can't change. We feel like we're the custodians of something as opposed to the owners of something. And the reality is that must be protected.
I think what you've also spoken about, Nick, is the immense role that luck plays in these things happening, because so much of what you've told me are actually lucky coincidences, lucky moments, but in and amongst a whole lot of bad luck. Sounds like you and Ross have had a lot of bad luck along the way. A tricky question, but I'd love an answer to if you have one. Many seemingly small moments in your life that can have a massive impact that people don't understand. Meeting someone, a eureka moment, studying the wrong thing. Are there any small moments that you could reflect on that you think have led you here?
I have some pivotal ones. There's a series of them. Sliding doors, I suppose. Why did I apply for a job at Element House? That's a huge moment in my life. Also, Ross and I bumping into each other at Standard 6 at school, or before Standard 6.
Younger, since 8.
Yeah, well, we bumped into, we were younger, and we then became friends because my dad and his mom were shopping for our school uniform, and we were in the same shop together. And so there's a moment. The Veldskoen moment, the car. But I think one crazy innocuous moment, which Ross and I shared, was when we were deciding on the actual shoe. The strange moment where we were in our manufacturer's office and they'd made all the samples. And we looked at them, and in the room was another sample, but not ours. It was another shoe. It was just standing there. And Ross and I had been through like 2-3 months of development, and all these colored shoes were in front of us. And we looked at it and we were like, it just doesn't feel like that one.
Yeah.
And we pointed at that one.
Yes.
And they were like, oh my God, these guys changing their minds again, blah, 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 blah. And in that moment, we were like, no, we think it's that one. Everything else is the same except the last in the mold has to be that shoe there.
Yeah.
And we left. And to this day, I think Ross and I will, if you had to tell us what the greatest danger of our entire business was, is that if we had accepted those original samples and didn't change.
Yeah.
Because now the thing that makes us is when people wear the shoe, they adore them.
Well, let me talk to that a little bit because I know what's going on here. You know, the great philosopher Blaise Pascal said that the heart knows reason, that reason knows nothing of. And I think that when people in business listen to their heart, that intuitive sense, also the other thing that happens in business is people radically underestimate gut feel. Gut feel is not an instantaneous moment. Gut feel is the accumulation of your life experiences telling you something in that moment. So I think that what you're talking about is kind of that collective memory, experience, hope, and ambition leading you to that shoe.
I also think it relates to design. And I was so lucky in life with Element House to have seen art up close and great design up close and great architecture up close and spend time with the Museum of African Design in Maboneng. And when you have a cumulative amount of visual literacy that builds up over time, there comes a moment when you can see something that's not right. And you don't know why it's not right, but it's a certainty. And Ross and I, we were so close to it that when we looked at it, you're right. That experience of having looked at so much, boom, it's not right. And we could see the thing that was right on the same table. But it was that wealth of experience and learning and a lifetime of things.
And you know, what I love about that is, for people listening to the story, is the power of intuition, intuitive thought. You know, because I've worked in marketing for over 3 decades and I've sat in a lot of research, what you often see is when you show people from an advertising or a marketing point of view a butterfly metaphorically flying, the first thing that they want to do is to shove a pin through the thorax, take the wings off it, you know, roll out the proboscis, get the dust on their fingers, and all of a sudden it goes from being this beautiful, mobile, ethereal thing to being something quite ugly.
An ornament.
An ornament. Yes. And I think that that's what we need to do. We need to embrace intuition far more in these kinds of decisions, because everything that you've told me so far defies logic.
I want to give you one more example of intuition where it played a huge role in our business. It was right in the beginning. You know, you can build a business on a spreadsheet and you could be rich beyond your dreams. What you're never is poor beyond your dreams on a spreadsheet. You never forecast the down end. Ross and I had done that, okay? We've been there. And we drew up a spreadsheet of what this business could look like. Sales, less cost of goods, equals gross profit. Less expenditure equals net profit. And we looked at the spreadsheet and we looked at the spreadsheet and we looked at the spreadsheet. And one of us, I think it was both of us, looked at each other and said, no, I'm not getting it. And what we did was we took our dining room table and we brought shoes out. And I said, okay, cool. Here's a pair of shoes, Ross. And he goes, okay, cool. Let's write down. How much did it cost? It cost X amount. How much are we selling it for? Nice. How much money do we have? Okay, now we've got 40 Rand left. Bang, we can buy another pair of shoes. Now we have 2 pairs of shoes on the table. And we modeled it out in real life with real shoes on a table so that the two of us could get our very slow arithmetic minds to visualize what a break-even could look like. Because we couldn't understand it on a spreadsheet. And I've worked on many spreadsheets. I've seen income statements and balance sheets and all the rest of it. But I think what you've also got to figure out sometimes, and this was our intuition telling us, is to say, take a step back, down to the very basics, visualize it differently, and figure out if you're actually a going concern and what it's going to take visually in order to grow this business. And that moment when Ross and I spent a full day at a dining room table. 1 pair of shoes, writing it down. 2 pairs of shoes, writing it down, until eventually we had like 40, 50 pairs of shoes and going, okay, that's what the business looks like. And then we understood it.
Amazing. You know, I think you're very lucky that a lifelong friendship has played out in such a remarkable value system in your business that comes through in droves. A lot of people, you know, that I've helped along the way in terms of ideas, you give them an idea, and then what they do with that idea is they run off to somebody with big bucks and they do the idea with them rather than saying, you know, here was the idea that we germinated together. Let's go on that journey together. And I think that what those people often do, to your earlier observation, is they might make a lot of money, but they don't make a huge amount of deposits in the soul. And I think for you and your best friend to have created this remarkable business together, to be doing this together, to be loyal and truthful and honest to one another is just a fantastic story in and of itself. And hopefully you'll write a book about this friendship one day, because I think it's worthy of a book. I mean, I've had my same closest friend.
Yes.
My mom met his mom in the nursing home 56 years ago when they were having me and my friend John.
Yeah.
And similarly for, you know, we've never done business together actually, but for 56 years, you know, we've supported each other through this life journey, and it's been one of immeasurable richness in every way.
Nobody must underestimate, though, that it's all roses.
Yeah.
You know, Ross and I,
what's coming?
we have a set of rules, man, and we debate harder than anybody you'll know.
Yeah.
And if you listen to myself,
that's called emotional honesty, isn't it?
And Ross and I go hard.
Yeah.
We do. But we've got a set of rules baked into our relationship that ensures that we can come back tomorrow and do the same thing.
Yeah.
And we're aligned.
Yeah.
You know, we both know why we're doing what we're doing.
When we say you're aligned, is that aligned in values?
Yes, we're aligned in values. We're very similar in terms of our value set. We're family orientated. When we started Veldskoen, remember, it was in this incredibly difficult period. And we made a deal and we shook on it. And the deal was that this business would look after our families. And that was the point. We were going to build something beautiful. We would be in service of that business, but we would work as hard as we can so that we can secure the family's futures. And that deal has never wavered, and it won't, because we're fully aligned in looking after each other.
Yeah.
Because at that moment, we didn't have anybody else.
Well, you know, Nick, people often say, you know, what are the profits? What's the bottom line? What's the this? What's the that? And I always say soft sell is the hardest sell of all. The stuff that happens between the cracks, the real shit, if I can put it that way. I can put it that way. It's my podcast. The real shit that matters. And I think that you've spoken a lot about that. I've got one last question, because you and I have had a very rich and layered conversation here today, and I've absolutely loved hearing your story. I must just tell you that.
Thank you.
I'm going to leave inspired, and I hope our listeners leave inspired too. You seem like a very curious man. What are you curious about at the moment?
I am curious. Right now I'm curious about 35mm photography.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
And why is that?
I love the arts, as you know, and I'm not artistic in that I can't paint.
Yeah.
But I find the technical application of things quite super interesting, and the development of things. And I think one of the subjects that maybe it's because I've got kids.
Yeah.
I'm trying to be more present, and I'm trying to value my time with them. And, you know, a phone, when you take a picture on a phone, these things have become so easy and accessible that I don't think we revisit them. And I don't think, even though the ability to capture images is so prevalent, we don't value them as much. And I think taking a picture with a 35mm camera, it's either a great picture or it's not a great picture. And I think the value goes up exponentially because it's a little bit more difficult to do. And so I'm quite interested in that process. I'm not saying I'm anywhere near able to.
Yeah.
But I'm trying.
Well, I like to put it a little bit differently. I hear exactly what you're saying, because I think you've either captured the moment or you haven't.
Yes.
You know,
It's very true. Not the image.
not the image,
Yeah.
the moment.
Yeah. The way it feels
Exactly.
at the time.
That's right.
Love that.
You can have it.
Thank you.
Nick, I really loved hearing your story today. Thank you so much for sharing it with me and my listeners.
Mike, thanks so much for having me. What a treat it is to sit in a room and speak to somebody that has been so close to iconic South Africa and iconic South African storytelling in terms of business and brand, and to give me the opportunity to tell our story on your platform.
It's so inspiring to see a South African proudly take on the globe with a brand that is so unique to this land. It really shows that you can achieve incredible things when you have a good idea backed by good people who believe in it. Thanks so much for listening today. If you enjoyed this podcast, why not leave us a 5-star review? Tune in to Willing Abel next time for more conversations that challenge perspectives.
This podcast is produced by Two Stories, written by Linda Scarborough, produced by Carol Williams, with audio editing, engineering, and sound design by Kozi Mzimela, with production assistance from MNC Saatchi Group South Africa's team, Maciek, Dubla, and Nadia, Siegel. Special thanks to Sonic Nursery and Edible Audio for the recording of these episodes.
I know it's gonna happen.